You can find Emily all over the internet talking about her alleged mistreatment, sexual abuse, and dramatic stories of her supposed cult involvement. The truth is very far from what she describes, but most podcast hosts do very little, if any, homework on the person before interviewing them. They also believe everything they say with little to no scrutiny. We have gone over her stories of sexual abuse by her father, sexual abuse by Bill Gothard, and how she came to make those claims. But those stories aren't the only problems in Emily's tale-bearing. She tells many more stories that aren't true. Here's another one. Emily didn't start pointing the finger at her father as a sexual abuser until after her personal interactions with Bill Gothard were basically concluded. Yet now she claims that he told her to write a letter of thanks to her father for sexual abuse she allegedly suffered. And notice in this clip, when she tells this tale, how she's enjoying the attention she's getting in the interview, and how the host soaks it all in with gaped mouth and deer in the headlight eyes, believing every word Emily says.
Yeah, so victims are first not told that what happened to them was indeed a crime. The overall broad term is inappropriate because it's not considered a crime, it's considered a moral failure.
Oh.
So my father's sexual abuse and sexual assault of me was never labeled as abuse and assault. It was never labeled as this was breaking the law. He should go to prison for this. Instead, it was your father is acting inappropriate toward you. And the answer to that is try to avoid him, try to cover up more, figure out what you are doing to tempt your father that is making him act inappropriate, because God designed him to have these overwhelming desires toward women. That is what we were taught. That was what was ingrained into us. I was personally told by Bill Gothard to write a letter to my father thanking him for the molestation because it made me stronger.
Oh my gosh, Emily.
Of course, this claim cannot be true because Emily had not claimed sexual abuse by her father yet. Bill Gothard was never told by Emily or her mother at any time that there was any sexual abuse going on in their home. And as you saw in the previous videos, what she describes as sexual abuse just isn't. This was all confirmed to me because I have read and studied many personal communications between Emily, Bill Gothard, and her mother. Through it all, never was sexual abuse by her father ever mentioned. You can see many of these documents in the future release of the documentary Shiny Slander, which you can find out more about in the links below. Emily is a very skilled, manipulative speaker. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen a more skilled one. I'll show you an example of that in just a minute. She leads the listeners into coming to dramatic conclusions about her alleged victimhood because she doesn't give them any details that would lead them to the truth of the story in context. But instead, she only gives them information that would lead them to the narrative she wants them to believe. She tells it in a dramatic way and leaves out key information, just like Shiny Happy People did in their documentary, Overall. This next clip is an example of how she puts phrases in a certain order. Watch how she claims she didn't know sexual abuse was anything but rape, and relating that information to the claim that her father molested her. She then mentions a kind of molestation that she came to realize was sexual abuse. This leaves the audience thinking she suffered that kind of abuse at the hands of her father without her actually saying she did.
The only kind of sexual abuse that I thought was sexual abuse was rape. That included 2 sets of genitals.
Right.
I didn't know there was any other form of sexual abuse. I didn't know molestation was considered abuse.
Right.
I didn't know rape with objects could be considered abuse or rape. Yeah, so...
This is the kind of crafty, manipulative language and stories Emily tells that leave the audience believing she was horrifically abused without her ever really being clear about what she's claiming actually happened specifically to her. And the first video I made about Emily on this channel tells what specific things she actually claims are sexual abuse by her father, which are not sexual abuse at all. If you do a search into interviews she has given, you will see that she has done this over and over again through the years to create a picture of herself as a victim in order to gain attention and sympathy, as well as to be seen as a heroic figure that others can look to for her expertise in overcoming adversity. It is very clear that she relishes the attention she has received from making these claims. I think it's also very clear why she didn't want to remain an anonymous Jane Doe when she could have easily done so. And if you go and look at the progression of her stories from several years ago and watch interviews she did then until now, you can see how her stories have been embellished and become more and more dramatic over time. Now, just as with several of the other plaintiffs in this failed repressed memories lawsuit, and as several of the interviewees from Shiny Happy People, Emily has made her entire life and identity grounded in the idea that she is a victim of sexual abuse at the hands of her father and Bill Gothard, and uses that identity to fuel a business. The truth is, Emily misrepresents people and situations in order to convince herself and others that she isn't really lying, when in fact she many times is, and she is crafting a false narrative to feed these personal goals. In the comments below, you will likely see a lot of people fussing at me about victim blaming or victim shaming. Let me address this right now. I'm not blaming victims of sexual abuse for anything. Victim blaming means that you acknowledge that a person is a victim and blame that person for what happened to them. Emily is a victim, but not a victim of sexual abuse by her father or Bill Gothard, according to her own stories. Emily is a victim of an unhappy home growing up. I think she's also a victim of real emotional problems, and she's a victim of Crohn's disease. She's not responsible for that. I'm not blaming her for any of these situations. But according to her own stories, she is not a victim of sexual abuse by her father or by Mr. Gothard. And the repressed memory stories are not true. Therefore, I'm not victim blaming her for sexual abuse. She didn't do anything to deserve sexual abuse, and she wasn't a victim of it in these instances. And that's the truth. There's much more about her that I am not revealing, including conversations I have had with members of her own family who do not believe her stories either. These family members believe she is deeply engrossed in the victim mentality, where victims are seen as heroes, and anyone who questions that status is a villain. And they love her and deeply wish that she would stop believing that being a victim is more valuable than recognizing and speaking the truth. And I really hope that someday Emily will join the many people who have realized that repressed memories are false and have reconciled with those they have hurt in the process of believing them and spreading false stories and narratives. Living in the lies she has chosen to embrace and spread must be eating at her soul. I hope she can escape that mentality and then truly help others to do the same. For more information on repressed memories, read The Myth of Repressed Memories by Dr. Elizabeth Loftus and Catherine Ketchum, or My Lie, The True Story of False Memories by Meredith Marin, or watch the documentaries Buried on Showtime or Amazon Prime, or Mind Over Murder, The True Story of the Beatrice Six on HBO or Max. There's a lot of information on the falsehood of repressed memories that you can find if you simply look it up. You can find the specific information I just described in the links below. Next time.
Everyone keeps focusing on Duggar. What they do not focus on is how the Duggars came to be.
We were part of the Institute in Basic Life Principles from as early as I can remember.
They operate as a cult in plain sight. World domination was the goal.
Is the Duggar family in a cult? We will look at the aspects of cultism and whether or not the Institute in Basic Life Principles actually falls under that category. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe.